Chairman.
I now recognize Representative Molinaro from the great state of New York.
It's convenient two from the great state of New York. Sadly, however, one of the states with some of the greatest cases of fraud. But that said, Mr. Chairman, grateful to you for your leadership. Mr. Ware, thank you for being here. I too want to echo the comments of my colleagues that the SBA administrator would choose simply not to be here. It is insulting, it is embarrassing, and it is absurd. It is not insulting to this committee or to Congress. It is insulting to the American taxpayers, the families, the farmers, the small businesses who for 2.5 years struggled through a pandemic and an economic shutdown that was well beyond their capacity to manage. It's insulting to the people who pay every day their taxes to support an institution and a government meant to provide for their best interest. It is insulting that the administrator of the SBA doesn't think that the issue of monumental fraud for an agency its size is worthy of presenting before Congress. Now, I say this not simply as some member who just got here. I say this because for the last 12 years, I was a county executive in the state of New York. It was my job to stand in front of countless residents and businesses and explain to them why their government was shutting them down and what resources and support would be available to them. In fact, my county was among the first in the state to secure SBA loan capacity so that we could move effectively to support businesses. And we worked with the chambers of commerce and others to be sure that they had access to the resources they need. And for me, this is important because, like countless families across America, I too lost a loved one. My father lost his life to COVID in April of 2020, and in response to that loss, so many families like mine tried to muster up what we could to be of help to the people who lived on with great struggle. It is embarrassing, it is insulting, and it is absurd that the SBA wouldn't be represented here today despite adequate notice, and as importantly, that they wouldn't be a part of an effort to secure what has been lost. And so I worked hard to ensure with my colleagues both in Congress and in state government to ensure that assistance and rapid delivery of that assistance would be made available to small businesses. Never did we think there'd be so little, however, vetting and security procedures in place, especially since we knew early on that there were red flags and we were able to identify them. But the SBA failed to implement basic safeguards even as warnings and reports of fraud were published. Can I ask you, Mr. Ware, it was suggested that you are unintentionally misleading the public as to the magnitude of fraud. Are you unintentionally misleading the American taxpayers?
Absolutely not.
Are you intentionally misleading the American taxpayers?
Absolutely not.
Do you believe that the SBA lost track of $200 billion?
I believe that there's potentially over $200 billion in fraud in these programs.
In my own state of New York, there was a case in 2021 where nearly 20 public, state, and municipal employees conspired together to submit and process false applications and defraud the SBA of over $1.5 million. Now, schemes like this were all too common and, of course, resulted in this at least $200 billion in outstanding fraudulent payments. Now, I certainly know that this Congress could make better use of $200 billion, but more importantly, the American taxpayers could make better use of $200 billion. And so at this point, we're challenged with how to recover these dollars. It's your agency, it's you, your investigatory capacity, your criminal prosecution, and the partners that you'll work with, obviously, to secure recovery. Can you speak to, though, however, the deficiencies in any collaborative effort that has been going on with the SBA and what strategy may or may not exist to recover the fraudulent payments?
Yes, I can, which is surprising, again, because we work really closely with the SBA to set up the controls and to go after seizures and forfeitures. This is something that we partner really well with. I do believe that Administrator Guzman is serious about it. She has implemented numerous of our recommendations to ensure that the control environment is stronger. So that discrepancy is kind of still puzzling to me in light of all the work that we've done together.
So a collaborative effort has been in place, yet the failure to acknowledge the problem will lead to the inability to solve the problem.
Well, I think quite honestly, the internal control environment doesn't really shift whether it's whatever the billion they said and 200 billion. It's the same.
So my time's up, Mr. Chairman. I'll follow up certainly after. But I thank you, Mr. Ware, and on behalf of those of us who led during the COVID pandemic, we're grateful for your stewardship.
Thank you.
And I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the chairman of the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, Dr. Brad Winstrup, from the great state of Ohio, for 5 minutes.